Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Alexander, and I'm a security engineer covering state, local, and education accounts in the Bay Area. In today's session, I'm going to be demonstrating Check Point's CloudGuard firewall in Microsoft Azure. This session is the last of a series of live demos my team has done throughout the year in different cloud platforms. Quick look at the agenda for the day. I'm going to do a short introduction into CloudGuard, and then I'm going to transition into a live demo. I'm going to show you how to create an environment, deploy a management server, deploy a gateway, deploy and secure a web server behind that gateway. And lastly, I'm going to demonstrate Check Point's adaptive policy feature. We're going to start out by briefly discussing the shared responsibility model. A common misconception when businesses are moving to the cloud is that your data is secure because the public cloud provider secures the cloud. So while the public cloud providers secure the cloud fabric, they have no knowledge of normal customer traffic and are unable to determine malicious content from benign. It's important to understand the balance of responsibilities when protecting the cloud infrastructure and protecting the data in your cloud environment. This is what infrastructure as a service providers refer to as the shared responsibility model. The provider is responsible for the security of the cloud, meaning they secure the infrastructure of the cloud. And the customer is responsible for the security in the cloud, meaning they secure their data, content, and applications. So you may be asking yourself, aren't the native security controls such as security groups and access control lists enough to protect our assets? So these controls are easy to implement and provide some basic security, but they can only filter traffic based on source, destination, port, and protocol. You have to think about it like this. Would you want just a packet filter firewall sitting at the perimeter of your physical data center? Unfortunately, in this day and age, this is simply not enough security. And that's exactly where the native security controls fall short. As you can see here, they don't offer unified management across all surfaces of your infrastructure. They offer no form of threat prevention in layers 4 through 7, no variation of URL filtering or application control, and they do not prevent zero-day malware. So the lack of advanced security in these controls can expose you to abuse of your cloud infrastructure. You're vulnerable to lateral threat movements, data breaches, use of cloud services, and more. Check Point's infrastructure as a service solution called CloudGuard was created to address these challenges. The solution provides the highest level of security across your entire cloud infrastructure. As you can see here, we integrate with all the major public cloud providers and also private cloud providers. I'd now like to transition into the Azure side of things, as this is the platform we're using for today's deployment. On this slide, you can see a couple of the key services I'll be using today. We have VNets. This is essentially your network in the cloud. It's a logical isolation of the Azure cloud where you will deploy your resources. We also have user-defined routes, aka route tables in the Azure GUI. This is the most important piece between Check Point and Azure. UDRs allow you to route traffic to the gateway and enforce segmentation. We also have Azure virtual machines. These are used to quickly spin up machines, and all of Check Point's templates in the cloud are run on VMs. I'd also like you to take note of 2 Check Point secure knowledge articles. SK 109360 describes the best practices when deploying Check Point in Azure. This article walks through the deployment steps in the Azure portal and also the configuration in Smart Console. I also reference SK 132192 for all the latest updates for CloudGuard on Azure. This is our Azure environment for the day. We have a VNet with an address space of 10.0.0.0/16. This VNet is going to have 3 subnets, a front-end subnet, a back-end subnet, and a web server subnet. We're going to deploy a CloudGuard gateway in between the front-end and back-end subnets, and we're going to deploy a web server in the web subnet. When users come in from the internet, they're going to connect to the gateway's public IP address. When they traverse the firewall, they're either going to be permitted or denied depending on the firewall policy configured. If permitted, then they'll be granted access to the web server. So without further ado, let's jump on over to the Azure portal and get started with today's demonstration. So this is the management portal. On the left-hand side, You can see some of the services offered by Microsoft Azure. For today's demonstration, we're just going to be using a subset of these services. We're going to be using resource groups. These are containers that group related resources together so that you can manage them as a single entity. We're going to be using virtual machines to deploy our web server, our gateway, and our management server. We're going to be using virtual networks, route tables, and Azure Active Directory. So due to the time constraint of today's session, I've actually already created a couple of these resources. I created the VNet already and the management server. So I'm going to show you how to create a VNet right now. So let's click on virtual networks. Once in here, if you don't have any VNets in your environment, there's going to be a button for creating a new VNet. If you do already have some, you can simply click on add and create a new one. So you give it a name, an address space, you create a resource group, select the location, and there's a requirement that you have to build each VNet with at least one subnet. So in our case, we already built the front end subnet. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump over to our VNet. We'll discard these changes, and we'll create some new subnets. As you can see, I already created the front end subnet. Let's now add the back end subnet. So give it a name. We can leave the address range as is. We're not going to assign a network security group nor a route table, and we can leave the rest as default. Click on OK. Next, we'll add the web subnet. We'll give it a name. We can leave the address range as is. We're not going to assign a network security group, and we're going to build the route table at a later time. So let's go ahead and click OK. All right, perfect. So now I'm going to show you how to create a management server. So on the left-hand side, you have to click on Create a Resource and search the marketplace for Checkpoint. As you can see here, these are Checkpoint's offerings in Microsoft Azure. We support clusters, management servers, scale sets, and single gateways. So whatever environment you're looking to implement, we support it. So let's go ahead and click on Checkpoint Security Management. Click on Create. We'll give it a name. We'll use password authentication. We'll create a new resource group. And the location will be the West US. Click OK. We're going to be spinning up an RD20 management server. This was recently added to the Azure Marketplace. We also have versions RD10 and R7730. My recommendation is to always use RD10 or RD20. We're going to use Bring Your Own License. This is because we're given a 15-day trial period by Checkpoint, but you also have the option to choose pay-as-you-go, depending on your preference. We're going to use the default recommended virtual machine size. D3v2 is more than enough for today's exercise. We're going to allow the management server to be accessed from any IP address. We're not going to run any scripts during the initial boot. And we're going to allow the management server to communicate with Checkpoint so that we can download blade contracts and other information. We're not going to allocate any additional disk space. So let's go ahead and click on OK. We'll choose the virtual network that this is going to be in, my VNet. And it's going to be in the front end subnet. So we'll click OK. Verify that everything is correct right here. Azure is running its final validation. Once that passes, we can click OK. And then create the management server. Because we already have one running, I'm not going to proceed with this, so I'll discard these changes right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back over to resource groups and delete the one that I just created because we will not be needing it. Okay, so the next thing I'd like to do is create the checkpoint gateway. Let's click on Create a Resource. We'll search for checkpoint. We're going to be choosing the Checkpoint CloudGuard Infrastructure as a Service single gateway. Let's click Create. So we'll give it a name, Checkpoint Gateway. We'll use password authentication. We'll create a new resource group. Location is going to be West US. And we'll click OK. Next, we'll select the version. We're going to be running an RD10 gateway. We'll use Bring Your Own License. You also have the option to do Pay As You Go, NGTP, or NGTX. We'll use the recommended default virtual machine size. And next, we'll select the installation type. So we have two options here. We have Gateway and Management. This is Checkpoint's standalone configuration. That basically means you're going to be running the gateway and management software on a single machine. And we also have Gateway Only. Because we already have the management server running, we're going to be running with Gateway Only. You also have the option to configure manually. This essentially means you choose the configuration during the first time wizard. In my opinion, it's always easier to choose it here. So let's choose Gateway Only. Next, we'll provide a SIT key. Essentially what this is it allows the gateway to establish trust with the management server. We're not going to run any scripts during the initial boot, and we want the gateway to be able to communicate with Checkpoint. No additional disk space, so we'll click OK. Next, we'll choose the virtual network, my VNet, and we'll configure the subnets. So this gateway has a NIC in the front-end subnet and a NIC in the back-end subnet. Just click OK. Double check that everything lines up. That's correct. And that's correct. Azure is going to run the final validation. Now that that has passed, we'll click OK and go ahead and create this gateway. So the next thing that we'll do is we'll go ahead and grab the management server's public IP address, and then we'll navigate to the web interface for that management server and download the local client application, which we will use to manage the Checkpoint infrastructure. Let's go to Resource Groups, Checkpoint Management, and here's where you can find the public IP address. So we'll click that and copy this IP. So we'll go to https:// and we'll paste the IP. We'll proceed. And then we'll log in. As this is my first time accessing this portal, you can see that we have another checkpoint protection. This is part of our Sandblast agent solution, verifying that this is not a phishing website. So this is the management server's web interface. As you can see here, we can configure basic network information, operating system information. We can also create users. The reason we're here is to download the local client application called Smart Console, which we will use to manage the Checkpoint infrastructure, and also security policies. In my case, I already have it installed on my machine, so I'm not going to be clicking this. But if you don't have it, this is exactly where you'd find it. Keep in mind that because we're running an RD20 management server, you would need an RD20 Smart Console version to manage that server. So let's open it up. Smart Console RD20. password, and then the IP address. Log in. Proceed. Perfect. So this is Checkpoint's Smart Console application. As you can see on the left-hand side, we have a nav bar. We're in the Gateways and Servers tab. This is where you can see all the objects that make up your Checkpoint infrastructure. We also have security policies. This is where you configure your access control policy, your threat prevention policy. Logs and monitor. This is where you have the best visibility in the industry into your infrastructure. And you have options to configure basic settings here. On the right-hand side, we have the object view. This is where you create the different objects that make up your infrastructure. You can put these objects in policies or create simple gateway objects here. What we're going to be doing now is creating the gateway object to represent the Azure gateway that we just deployed. So let's click on More, Network Object, Gateways and Servers, and Gateway. You could choose either Wizard mode or Classic mode. It depends on your personal preference. We'll go with Wizard. We'll give it a name. And we'll select the platform. We have CloudGuard Infrastructure as a Service. We'll choose that one. Next, we're going to need the IP address of the front-end NIC. So let's go back to the Azure portal and find that IP. Click on Resource Groups, Checkpoint Gateway. As you can see, here are all the resources. And this is going to be the front-end NIC private IP. So we'll copy this IP address. Now that that's copied, let's confirm that it's deployed. It has successfully deployed. So we'll jump back over to Smart Console and finish the object creation. So we'll paste that IP. Click Next. We'll provide the SIT key that we configured during the deployment of the gateway. Click Next. We'll confirm the two NICs. As you can see, here's the front-end NIC and the back-end NIC. This address is very important right here because what we're going to do is enforce segmentation and route traffic through this interface. So let's go ahead and click Close. And we'll make some final changes to the object. So what we're going to do is click on Network Management. And we're going to disable anti-spoofing on both interfaces, as this is done by Azure. All right, perfect. Now that that's done, what we're going to do is jump over to security policies and create a permissive policy. So we'll change this to action accept and log, and then we'll install policy. I'm going to publish and install. As we have not implemented any threat prevention blades, we can untick this for now and click install. All right, perfect. So now that that installed successfully, what we're going to do is we're going to go grab the gateway's public IP address. I'll show you why in a second. So here's that IP. We'll copy this. And then we're going to navigate to the gateway's web interface. Paste the IP. Proceed. We're going to verify that it's not a phishing website. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a route on the firewall to route traffic destined for the web subnet through the internal interface. So let's click on IPv4, static routes. We'll add a route. This is going to be the web subnet. This is the destination. The subnet mask is 255.255.255.0. Next, we'll add a gateway IP address. And this is going to be 10.0.1. Not typing. 10.0.1.1. And the reason for this address is this is the first address in the backend subnet. This represents the Azure router. So we'll click Save. The reason this is required is because the firewall is not directly connected to the web subnet. All right, perfect. So now that we have that set up, what we're going to do is we're going to jump back over to the portal and deploy the web server. So we'll click on Create a Resource. I'm going to do a basic Nginx server. We're going to deploy this in the My VNet resource group. We'll give it a name. Call it My Web. West US region. We'll leave all this as default. With password authentication. Next, we'll leave this as default SSD. Configure the networking settings now. It's going to be in My VNet, and this is going to be in the web subnet. It's not going to have a public IP address, and it's not going to have a security group. We can leave the rest as default and click on Review and Create. Validation passed, so we'll go ahead and click Create. All right, perfect. So now what we're going to do is set up the route tables. So let's jump on over here to Route Tables. Create route table. We'll call it My VNet Routes. Deploy this in My VNet resource group, West US, and click Create. So we'll give that about a minute to deploy, and then we'll go ahead and create some routes. Okay, so now that the route table has deployed, we'll click refresh, and there it is. So what we're going to do now is set up two routes. So you click on routes, add, we'll call the first route intra VNet. This will be anything in the VNet. It's going to route through virtual appliance. This is going to be the internal NIC of the gateway. So click OK. We'll create another route. We'll call this one default gateway. This is anything destined for outside of the VNet. Next top, virtual appliance. It's that same address. Okay, so the next step is to associate this route table with the web subnet. So click on subnets and associate. It's going to be in my VNet. We're going to choose the web subnet. Click OK. All right, perfect. So now that we set up our user-defined routes, we're going to jump back over to Smart Console and make some changes to the gateway object. So what we're going to do is define the networks that sit behind this internal NIC. So double-click this, modify the topology, leads to, override, specific, and then what we're going to do is we're going to create an address range representing the networks that sit behind this NIC. We'll call this internal subnets. First address is going to be 10.0.1.1. And the last address is going to be 10.0.2.255. Click OK. What we're also going to do is turn this into a bit more than a firewall. We're going to activate IPS according to the policy, anti-bot, and antivirus. So click OK. Next, we're going to update the security policy. So we're going to create a rule above this. We'll call it traffic to web server. Source is going to be any. Destination, however, is going to be the checkpoint gateway. Services, HTTP. And we're going to do HTTPS. We'll change the action to accept, and we'll log. We're going to add another rule below this. We'll call it SSH to all. Leave source and destination as any, but the service is going to be SSH. Action accept and log. Next, we'll lock down the policy a little bit more. We'll change the cleanup rule to drop. Next, we're going to set up a NAT rule. So let's create a rule at the top. Original source is going to be any. Destination is going to be the checkpoint gateway. Service is going to be HTTP. Translated source, original. Translated destination, however, is going to be a new object. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a host object to represent the web server. So we'll call it web server. And the address you can find in the portal. I'll show you where to find it. So click on resource groups, my VNet. Here's the NIC for the web server. And here's the IP address. So we'll copy that, Jump back over to Smart Console. Paste it in and click OK. Now what we're going to do is we're going to double check the threat prevention policy has a profile active. As you can see, we have the optimized profile. It's running IPS, anti-bot, antivirus, and a couple more threat blades. So what we'll do is we'll install the policy now. Publish and install. We'll tick threat prevention and click install. Okay, so now that we installed the policy, what we're going to do is we're going to jump back over to the portal. We're going to grab the public IP address of the gateway. We're going to navigate to http:// and then that IP. And as you can see, we hit the web server. So now we've successfully deployed a gateway that protects a web server. Let's jump back over to Smart Console and check out some of the logs. We'll filter for HTTP. And as you can see, here's a log by me coming in from my IP address, the gateway, and we're natted to the web server. So the next thing that I'd like to show you in today's demonstration is Checkpoint's adaptive policy feature. This is the ability to create a policy with objects taken directly from the Azure platform. The benefit of doing this is that we do not need to create an object for every resource in our Azure environment. The objects that we pull are fully dynamic, meaning that if they change on the Azure side, they will be automatically updated on the Checkpoint side too. So we're going to start out by creating a connection between our security management server and our Azure environment. Creating this link will allow us to be exposed to Azure native objects such as VNets and VMs. This is done using API calls between the management server and the Azure environment. The first thing that we need to do is activate the CloudGuard controller on the management server. So what we'll do is we'll open up a PuTTY session. We're going to grab the public IP address of the management server. We'll paste that here and click open. We'll proceed, log in. And what we'll do is we'll type CloudGuard on. Now we have activated the CloudGuard controller on the management server. So we'll close out of this PuTTY session. We'll now create an authentication method. We're going to use Azure Active Directory to do this. So the first thing that we want to do is click on Properties and grab the directory ID. Copy and go ahead and paste this in a notepad file. Next, what we'll do is we'll click App Registrations, New Application Registration. We'll give it a name. Application type, and a sign-on URL. Click Create, And what we'll do is we'll grab the application ID. And then click on settings. What we need to do is create a secret key. So click on keys, call it CloudGuard, duration never expires, and then we'll click save. Now this value is displayed. Make sure to copy this value because once you leave this screen, we'll not be able to access this value anymore. So we'll copy that and paste it in here. All right, perfect. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create an access role. So we'll go back to resource groups. We'll click on My VNet Resource Group, Access Control. We'll add a role. Make it a contributor, be a reader as well. And we'll find our CloudGuard controller and click save. All right, perfect. So now what we'll do is we'll jump back over to Smart Console and actually create an object to represent our Azure environment. So what we'll do is we'll click on New, More, Server, Data Center. Now, as you can see here, these are some of the different platforms that we integrate with. We're going to select Microsoft Azure. We'll give it a name. And then we'll input the details that I told you to store. So the application ID first. Then the key. And the directory ID. Next, we'll click Test Connection. So once we see the green connected, that means we're good to go. So let's click OK. And then we're going to publish. What we're going to do now is jump over to the access control policy, and we're going to create a dummy role. Add a new role above. And what we're going to do is we're going to pull the object directly from the Azure environment. So let's click on Import, Data Centers, and the Azure controller that we just created. As you can see here, we now have the ability to pull dynamic objects directly from our resource group. So what we're going to do is we're going to search for My Web and pull the web server. You hover over the object, you can see the metadata associated with it. Last time it was updated, the IP address, as you can see, it's 10.0.2.4. What I'm going to demonstrate now is I'm going to jump over to the Azure portal and change this IP address. And then we're going to jump back over to Smart Console and see how long it takes to be reflected on our side. What we'll do is we'll click on Resource Groups, My VNet Resource Group, the web server NIC. As you can see, it's 10.0.2.4. So what we'll do is we'll click on IP configurations, and we'll give it a static IP, make it .100. So go ahead and click Save. The web server is going to go for a reboot now, and it will come up with the new IP address. So let's jump back over to Smart Console and see how long it takes to be reflected on our side. All right, so the change went through, and that was about 15 to 20 seconds. So we now have a dynamic object in our policy. So that's the last thing that I want to demonstrate for you guys today. I appreciate you taking the time to join. One last thing that I want to show you is where to find additional information on whatever cloud platform you're using. So let's go to www.checkpoint.com. We'll click on Products, Public Infrastructure as a Service Security. And if you scroll down, you can find additional information for whatever public cloud platform you're using. All right, thanks everyone for joining. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.